It's lovely to welcome you here today. This is Emmanuel from Denove. So Denove is based in Montpellier. It develops products from rare bacteria, notably the extremophile bacterial genus Deinococcus. This is one example. There are, I believe, 47. Correct me if I'm wrong. Before coming to Denove, Emmanuel has worked at Novozymes for about 9 years, I believe. That's the previous one.
Okay,
I
remember.
And I believe Denove now is focusing on 3 main areas. So you've got your antibiotics that you're looking at, sort of skin care and cosmetic side of things, and then you have some other client things such as the animal feed process, I believe. So
that's right.
I wonder if I could start by, making a comment about the fact that I believe Denove is an interesting company because you're one of the few that crosses the divide between industrial biotech and medical biotech. How does that work from a funding point of view?
It's hell. So it's these are 2 different businesses. On one hand, you get the pharma side, which has been well described by Christina before. So it's with very different investors, very different timelines, very different objectives and challenges, and you deal with life and death in a way. We have one of our compound is actually treating gastrointestinal disease, severe infection, Clostridium difficile infections. We're starting in phase 2A next year, so it's kind of, we will recruit patients who are basically, in ICU, who have, if you are above 65 years old, you are, 50% chances of dying in hospital. It's the biggest hospital-acquired infection in the US. So this is very fundamental. We're going to try to save people. It's a niche product. It's a very interesting one, IV. We can talk more about that. And on the other hand, you've got a strategy whereby we're developing compounds to provide, cosmetic benefits to customers. So it's skin benefits. And they're not OTC. They really are cosmetic products. So it provides you with the skin. It works on antioxidation, anti-inflammation, lipolysis, whitening, which is very trendy, and it works. And we are, of course, because we are a science-based company, we are running clinical trials, with our cosmetic products. So it's also a little bit science-based. But when I've said that, you can realize an investor is looking at it and say, God, why am I investing into, pharma or industrial biotech? An interesting thing here is that in our industrial development, we are commercializing our products. We've launched an active ingredient this year. We have developed a second one with a company called GreenTech in April. So we've got 2. We're developing 3 other ones with other companies. We are working on our second active compound. So we should have probably half a dozen active cosmetic ingredient next year, commercial, if everything goes well. So we're really building a portfolio, and step by step, this will generate revenues for the company. In pharma, we're not close to generating revenues right now. We're investing and spending money. So the first thing is, revenues will partially fund the pharma business. Not enough, but it will partially fund the pharma business. The second thing is, of course, that it demonstrates that Denove is a company that can commercialize products. So it's not just running R&D just to do R&D. It's running R&D with the aim to succeed and commercialize. And that's, I think it's key for investors to see that this can be done. And at the end of the day, you described it well. Denove is a microbiology platform. So we have a biodiversity department. We're screening bacteria for relevant activities. We have an analytical department. We run genetic engineering and metabolic engineering. So we're the only ones able to modify crazy bugs in a way. And it works well. The first active compound in cosmetics is actually being produced by Deinococcus geothermalis, which is a bacteria that nobody would be able to modify in that room and probably on the planet, I would think. So it's very unique, but it all starts with microbiology. It all starts with bacteria. Antioxidants can be manufactured by bacteria, and antibiotics, of course, are manufactured by bacteria mostly. So it's the platform itself is the common ground that we use in order to demonstrate that we can do something useful.
So, I mean, just going back to what you were saying about the sort of funding side of things, I mean, do you find you've got some investors that are more interested in one and some that are more interested in the other, or do you?
So we're kind of also a crazy company because we are listed and we've been listed since 2012. And if I'm telling you that we launched our first product this year, can you imagine what we were in 2012? I mean, so not much. I mean, we're not selling anything. We had promises, and that's what you do when you IPO. What you do is you sell an equity story. So you tell something to the investors and hope for the best, right? Mostly, and we've run since then 2 secondary offerings. We failed one big time. I mean, in 2014 we went big time trying to raise 20 million. We went with a bank that did not understand anything about our business. We went ahead, went through the offering, and after 2 weeks we failed. So when you fail on the stock exchange, it's not as if you can say, well, I'm going to grab and keep the 10 million that I have raised. It's zero. So in July, I end up in Montpellier and with 1 million left in the bank and a failed IPO. So it's always, of course, a difficult one. But the interesting thing with our business model is that you can attract, investors that are interested in industrial developments or pharma developments. And you always find a few that are more generalists and that are interested in both activities. However, I should say that being a small French biotech in health and industrial developments is very difficult. So we raised 8.5 million in June, which is nice, 8.5 million. I mean, it's nice on your bank account, but it's not enough to run the projects that we want to run. So of course we need to raise money again probably next year, and we're looking at every single option we have. We're looking at debt, we're looking at non-dilutive funding, which for antibiotics are quite useful, and they exist. I mean, mostly in the US, but also in Europe. The European Investment Bank. There's the IMI2 initiative, which is, for a small biotech like us, probably 6 months worth of work for somebody night and day. But there is non-dilutive funding as well. So we're going to have to gather all these tools in order to raise enough funds to fund the projects that we have ahead of us.
Okay. So, it sounds like from what you were saying, it is quite difficult to get funding. So, you were saying, I know you mentioned to me before that the market caps are quite low at the moment for the companies. So it
really depends. It's always difficult. I think it's always hell because you don't know exactly what you're gonna be able to raise. But our market cap is, I think, 38 million euro, which is not bad. But when you compare what we do, entering a phase 2A, a trial with a niche compound, dealing with, as I said, life and death, and when you're valued at 38 million, when you think about what companies would be valued at in the US, it's very different, and it's a function of the number of VC and funds that you can find in the US compared to Europe. And I agree, again, when you're a small biotech French company, it's difficult to go to the US and raise money. So there's lots of consultants who want to actually roadshow you in the US and show you the world and talk to investors. So when you're a bit naive, you do that. And honestly, it's very difficult. You don't find US investors just because you have promising products. It's marketing, it takes years, it warrants results on your side, big time, otherwise it's really useless. But compared to a company working within antibiotics in the US, yes, we're valued at a very low level. And compared to a company that has demonstrated the fact that they can commercialize products, we are undervalued for sure. And of course, I think we're undervalued because I'm the CEO of the company, so I'm biased.
So if you had to talk to someone who was coming into it, would you recommend that they move into industrial biotech or medical biotech?
Both. It's of course a good question because if you think about it, maybe you could think at Deinov not being the same company in 5 years from now. If we develop a real portfolio of active cosmetic compounds that can, by the way, be used in food as well, because an antioxidant can be used in cosmetics, but also in food applications. When you think about us also developing compounds in feed, if we have a big enough portfolio of compounds, at one point you can think about doing something different from a corporate standpoint. Okay. Yeah, and that's basically it. Usually, if you talk to a pure player, an investor, who is only going to invest in a pure player, they won't do it because they don't know where the money is going to be. So you can earmark the money and tell them that it's going to cover clinical trials, but it's very difficult for them to invest in a company like us. So you need to rely on funds, and there are a few in the US and in Europe who can actually invest in a company doing biotech as a whole.
So you referred to your being a publicly listed company as being a tricky one. I mean, how has the process been? Would you do it again if you had the opportunity, or would you perhaps do it a slightly different route?
So first of all, I mean, it's always a blessing and a curse, right? Because when you're listed, you can raise money pretty much any time. I mean, you can, if I want to do a secondary offering in a couple of months from now, I will do a secondary offering. I can decide to do it because I want to raise money. I can fail, of course, but I can do it. And I guess you could do it privately as well. But you don't have to always rely on VCs. I mean, you can rely on retail shareholders. In France, I mean, they are a big part of the small offerings. We have 8,000 retail shareholders on our capital, so it's a lot. So you can do that. You can also play with tools like equity lines. I know investors hate it, but it's a way for us to raise money on a regular basis. So you deal with the bank, as serious as possible, of course, and they are able to raise money for you on a regular basis, and it helps. You can decide to do a private placement. You can, so there's a series of tools that you can use. Of course, the curse is you can only raise so much money because your market cap is what it is, and if usually investors don't want to be diluted above, I don't know, we need to ask the bank here, but probably 25-30% is already quite a bit. So if you are valued at 40 million, the only thing you can raise is probably 10-12 million, which is already a big dilution. So it limits the amount of money that you can raise. So it's difficult. And then, of course, the second thing that is also difficult is that is communication. I mean, you need to have very structured communication with investors. I mean, I can't say anything tonight that investors do not know already.
Of course.
So don't ask me too many questions.
As I mentioned, I referred to briefly, you spend quite a lot of your time working prior to Denov, working at Novozymes. I mean, that's obviously one of the really big players in the industrial biotech field. I mean, can you mention a bit about what was that like, and how did that lead to you becoming the CEO of Denov?
Okay, that's a personal question. So, so Novozymes, I mean, it's very different. I mean, I learned biotech at Novozymes. It's an amazing company. I mean, really, it's a cash machine for several reasons. They run a huge amount of R&D, and they have an amazing production machine, which is that they optimize their bugs on a regular basis. So it's a very efficient company. Danes are very smart people, I think. It's been very nice working. I learned a lot, but then it's a personal choice. You run a big company, and then I was managing $650 million in the US, so it's a pretty hefty sum. But then you after 9 years, what you do is you develop a new strategy. You had a few words, a new pitch, and then you do the same, and it's you want to do something different. And then what you do is you jump into something very different. So I jumped from 650 million US in the USA to minus 8 million in France. So it was a huge gap. And from a team of 120 people to, at the time, 15 people. Now with 60, which is too much if you look at the spending, which is not enough if you look at how fast we can make it. But I'm glad I did it. If I had to do it again, I would do it again, just because I learned a lot, and being part of a startup company is really very interesting, and the impact you make on the team, on the decisions you make, is amazing. But you have to be amazingly resilient. When we failed on our secondary offering in 2014, you go back to your office, you look at yourself and you say, what am I doing here? And then you bounce back, basically. But it's very interesting, and it's a lot more interesting than working in a major group. And it's a lot more tiring, and I can't hear people tell me that they work more in big groups than in startup companies. It's not true.
So I think Deinococcus is a very interesting species. I think there are 47 strains in total. I mean, I wonder if you could maybe just mention a few things about what's so interesting about them, because I'm not sure everybody would know about that.
Sure. So it's 47 genera, but we have 2,500 bacteria. So it's
okay.
Deinococcus.
Sorry,
it's one of the oldest organisms on the earth. It's some of them actually date back from 3.8 billion years old, so they're part of the Big Bang in a way. So it's an interesting bacteria because it has gathered the genes and pieces of its environment over the last billions of years. It's also R&D, so we benefit from a few billion years old of R&D, which is interesting because you can't usually do that. It's a very robust microorganism. What was difficult is to master the genetic and metabolic engineering, because and it's the same in pharma or in industrial biotech. If you bump into an issue when you work on E. coli, you look at 100,000 papers and you probably find the issue you have with the metabolic pathway. When we bump into an issue with Deinococcus, we do it ourselves. But we did it, and now we are able to modify Deinococcus as easily as anybody else can modify E. coli or Saccharomyces, so yeast or a traditional bacteria. So it provides us with the ability to boost production of given secondary metabolites. It allows us to work with the bacteria that is where the inoculum is very easy to work with, because the activity is very high. Even though you freeze it, even though you work at you freeze them at minus 80 degrees, you are always able to revitalize the bug. So it's an interesting one. But I should say that if the industrial biotech part of it is really based on Deinococcus, our first active has been developed based on the Deinococcus geothermalis host strain. So we work industrially with Deinococcus. It's not just a circus beast. It's really it works. The pharma development will most likely be based on other extremophile. And what is interesting is when you acquire an expertise with crazy bugs, you acquire real expertise across the board. So in pharma, and specifically within antibiotics, we believe that resistance can only be tackled if we come up with totally new structures. And the totally new structures will most likely come from nature, because bacteria produce all kinds of secondary metabolites, including antibiotics. And we believe that the craziest bacteria will produce the most interesting structure, which of course does not prevent us from running also medicinal chemistry on top of genetic engineering. But what is interesting with Deinov is that we work with biodiversity, so we screen relevant bacteria, and we can screen pretty much anything, the craziest one. We can run genetic and metabolic engineering, we can run enzymology, and we can also add on top of it medicinal chemistry. So we kind of assemble a whole puzzle that supposedly, hopefully, one day will be very efficient on resistant strains, which is what we are working against.
So I know you're sort of quite a player in the sort of synthetic biology side of things. I mean, because most of these organisms are modified. That's correct, isn't it?
That's right.
So when you're using those for something like cosmetics or food additives, I'm just interested because there's been a lot of talk about GMOs and gene editing, and obviously the recent ruling in the European Court that restricting gene editing with CRISPR. I know it's not quite the same thing, but I wonder if that comes up as an issue with consumers. I mean, do people have issues with that, particularly for the food additives?
So it's of course the good old story. I mean, if you are in a hospital with let's say a major gastrointestinal disease, and you are about to die, and if the doctor asks you, you're going to take that antibiotics because it's been worked out in a crazy way, I mean, the guy's going to take it. If he has a dry skin, and if there's a cosmetic product on his night table and he's about to grab it, and somebody tells him, it's been worked out with the same technology, it's genetic engineering, he won't take it. So it's of course completely silly, but we have to deal with regulatory affairs, and we have to deal with the right procedure. The funny thing in cosmetics is, if I had asked people a couple of years back, the cosmetic industry, I would have gone ahead and talked to L'Oréal and LVMH and so on, and tell them, well, L'Oréal actually not so much, but let's say some of the major brands, tell them we're about to work out an amazing compound, we're going to have to run genetic engineering, but it's going to be crazy, it's going to be clinically proven, it's going to provide benefits that nobody else can provide. I bet you 90% would have told me you would have never succeeded. So we did it the other way around. we went ahead and developed the whole process. We went ahead and ran clinical trials. So we demonstrated skin renewal, we demonstrated antioxidation, radiance, wrinkle reduction, all of that, and we presented the products. And we said, this is what we have. And we just, by the way, this morning announced that we struck a deal, with a major distribution company, which tells you that there is no issue with the product. And then I said, well, great, tell us how it was worked out and so on. And we explained the whole process. Said, well, genetic engineering, okay, yeah, 10% of the market will not like it, but it's not a big issue. So it's and this is, of course, because it's cosmetics. And it's different from food and feed, where we're going to have to go through regulations that are a lot more stringent. But I think, and we talked to, it's an interesting organization called Cosmos in cosmetics. They only do the very nature, green, the greenest of the greenest thing. So you end up putting water on your face and washing your clothes with water. So it's tougher, but it's Cosmos. So it's very interesting. And I asked them, but why do you have these oil-derived products approved? It's oil. Yeah, but we make exceptions and so on. I said, well, our Fit and Resist product, it's genetically engineered. The bug is genetically engineered, but the product, there's no DNA, nothing. It's pure. It's concentrated. Yeah, but I need to think about it. It's people have ethical issues and they need to think harder. So it's a little bit crazy. Yeah. But in cosmetics, it works very well. And by the way, we also provide a streak of active cosmetic ingredients that are purely non-GMO. So I shouldn't say non-GMO because I hate this non-GMM or not issued from GMM, but it's an active extract coming from all of these unusual bacteria that we sell, and it works as well. We're developing with a company called Greentech in Clermont-Ferrand an active compound called Ebelis, and it's also an antioxidation, anti-aging compound. So it works, both works.
I have to ask because I know a bit about the dermatology industry. When you say clinical trial, is that really a clinical trial or is this with 10 people?
So I can do marketing tonight? Okay. It's different, of course. It's not 10, it's from 30 to 50. They're not patients, they're volunteers. But you need to demonstrate something meaningful. We get pictures of wrinkle reduction. We have when it's whitening, it's measured. So things are measured, and we sell it for a very high price because it is of high value. So if you don't have that, you don't sell the product.
Interesting.
So it's not as bad.
I think it's high time that we opened it up to the audience. So who has some questions?
It's a good point. Mostly right now we attract speculative investments. Investors. What they're looking at. I'm going to be very transparent here because it's when you run an offering in Paris, retail shareholders are looking for the stability of Air Liquide and the upside of an Inet Pharma or DBV. So it's a little bit difficult. But they really are betting on a big increase of the stock price. So it's really speculative, I think. I should say also that retail investors have been very faithful and like the equity story, but they are looking for the upside. Investors, when you run an offering, they're looking at the discount. So they take the discount. You have to, when you are listed, if your stock price is at 4, you have to offer 3 for the investors to jump in, right? And usually it's a bit crazy because stock price realigns on 3 and they have to wait a little bit to cash in, and usually they exit very quickly, so it messes up the stock price, but at least you have the money. So mostly in France, they're looking for the upside, for the discounts. Valuation is difficult, and when it comes to us, it's difficult because you get a mix of traditional BP, so you have sales forecast. Between you and me, I know roughly where we are going to be, but it's plus or minus 100% right. The pharma, the pharma is really something that you can more easily, when you run an NPV, and the US, they love that. You can't go ahead without an NPV. So we've run an NPV on our most advanced compound, which is this gastrointestinal product. We have an NPV which is pretty stringent, where we have evaluated the number of patients, the cost that can apply, the clinical trials, the time it's going to take, the cost that we're going to have to incur. So it's a pretty precise, and that's easy to present. For our other compounds that are either in discovery or non-clinical or preclinical, non-regulatory preclinical phases, it's a lot more difficult. But in the US, you need an NPV, you need or a DCF or something similar in order to approach these investors. And you need a BP. I mean, whether it's wrong or right, you need that. Whereas in France, and the last time we raised money through French investors and European investors and also an Australian investor, they don't, I mean, it's really generalists. I mean, they jump in because of the discount, so they don't ask for a BP or a DCF of any sort. I think he discovered something which is pretty amazing, which is the fact that the Deinococcus radioadherens has the ability to auto-repair its genome once it's broken in 100 different pieces. So you add a drop of water and the genome reassembles, which is, I think, pretty unique on the planet. It's a very complex mechanism. I am unable to describe that, but it's due to various mechanisms, protein-based S layer in the membrane. So it's pretty elaborated and unique. In cosmetics, we use that because it looks great, right? If you can reassemble your genome, imagine you apply a cream that has, so great. In real fact, it's just a demonstration that the bug is very robust, which I explained during my talk, and it's true. So it provides us with industrial benefits. The inoculum is always something we use very, very efficiently. The scale-up we did with our first active compound with Deinococcus geothermalis, we replicated fermentation trials at 20 liters only, so went from 2 to 20 liters, and then we went straight to the cubic meter industrial production, and we had no issue. We were able to repeat, and that's due to the fact that the bug is very robust as well. So only cosmetic benefits. So we run R&D. So the first active compound we developed, we decided, as I said, to develop this one from A to Z. So we selected the bacteria, we modified the bacteria, we produced various batches, we analyzed the batches, we confirmed the structure of the product we were manufacturing. We ran fermentation at 1, 2, 20 liters. We developed a process book. We did the DSP in our lab, the whole DSP. So it's extracted with ethanol, it's stabilized in jojoba oil. We did everything, the whole process book. And then we went to see Piver, which is a fermentation platform, and we said to them, do this. And we sent 2 engineers, and they just did the job. They just applied everything. So it's a product we developed from A to Z. The only thing we don't have is we are not bad at BD, so we can sign deals, but we don't have any salespeople. I mean, and I can't hire 20 people in the US, in Asia, and Europe to sell our product. So we had to strike, and we have to strike deals with companies that will provide the products to the major brands all over the world and to ingredient companies. And you have a streak of options that you can take. For the first compound, we decided to pick and mix. So we signed several deals. Univar is the first one. Univar is a traditional specialty chemical distribution company. They are very present in the cosmetic industry. Their job is basically to sell the product we have. So we will sell the product to them, and they will sell this product at, of course, a different price to customers. And so it's a pure distribution agreement. Upfront payments in industrial biotech, very difficult. And with the distribution company, it's a little bit, they're not here to co-develop a product with you. They're here to distribute the product on your behalf. So it's difficult to ask them for anything, But we were quite successful with quite a few companies wanted to sell our product, which is hopefully a good sign.
So it's non-exclusive?
It's exclusive in Europe.
Okay.
But it's non-exclusive. I mean, anybody can benefit from the product. So it's exclusive from us to them, but the whole industry can buy the product. Yeah. I don't think we have enough to buy anything. Small other small companies maybe. We're kind of fully integrated. So instead of buying, we've been internalizing our technology. So this is how we do it. When we actually acquired a company beginning of this year in Germany, Morphochem, through their holding company Biovertis and through TVM Capital. But obviously it's a phase 2, open phase 2 compound with an FDA status, which is fast track and QIDP. So it's a very nice compound, and it's a niche compound. We really believe that this can solve a major issue in the US. This could have been valued at a high price. So we decided with TVM to do an innovative deal, which is a share payment. So we will pay them in shares. And in order to provide attraction to the water mill, they also gave us a few millions as part of our offering. So this is, of course, not us using shares, but it's a little bit doing this, you know. And they will only be granted shares if the compound progresses through the process. If it does not, you know, they will not be paid. So it's a win-win type of deal. So we used it in that way.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Emmanuel. You can continue the conversations afterwards.